Okay, the video I responded to you with was a parody of your question for Catholics. I was trying to point out the absurdity of your question. It was not meant as an overarching case for a stateless society, yet in this video you decided to respond to it as if it was one, and the result is going to be an extremely emotional and unclear exchange. First, I don't know who said you support the state unconditionally. I was just doing a parody of your Catholic Church video. You point to a bunch of bad things about the Catholic Church and ask how people can be Catholic. So I pointed to all the bad things that the United States government has done and asked how people can support democracy. This wasn't to imply that you supported everything the United States government has done. It was just to point out the absurdity of your question for Catholics. Second off, if you support direct state control of medical services, you are not a libertarian as it is commonly understood in the United States. I don't care what some guy's political compass test says you are, you're not a libertarian as it is commonly understood. You know, there's a guy like the Elmo is Evil calls himself a libertarian anarchist or libertarian socialist or whatever the fuck. He's a totalitarian statist, you know, state knows best kind of guy. He's not. Although I don't even like the term libertarian. I sometimes use it in loose exchange accidentally, but if we're going to get into definitions, I would not call myself a libertarian, and I don't think anyone should call themselves a libertarian because it's kind of a broken word. I mean, Glenn Beck's calling himself a libertarian. So, anyway. Third off, yes, state is a very nebulous term, which is why I nailed it down in my book, link in the description. The video I responded to you with was not an overarching case for the stateless society, which is why I did not bother to define the state. I do define the state in my book, and most people who oppose the state do define the state. Fourth off, that you are Canadian wasn't relevant to the parallel I was drawing. The main seat of the Catholic Church is in Rome, yet most Catholics aren't even in Europe, let alone Italy, let alone Rome. And the main seat of democratic statism is the United States. That was the parallel I was drawing. That you don't care much for the United States federal government is true, just as Tumbleweed Joe not caring for the Vatican is true. Yet you brought up Vatican scandals, and I brought up the United States scandals. Or invasion, bad things. Yeah, okay. I was drawing a parallel. Fifth off, your knowledge of the U.S. Constitution seems to be just about as empty as that of most Americans. The United States Constitution grants the federal government unlimited power. See my article on that if you care. Sixth off, I don't see how society as a whole has progressed. At least not obviously. I see how technology has improved. Okay. Some people are more free, some people are less free, and there are more foreign interventions than ever. Maybe you can make a case one way or another, but it's not obvious. Seventh off, yes, there are some states that do less bad things. There are also less bad denominations that believe in Catholicism or believe in like all the books of whatever the hell Catholicism is, and they don't molest kids. Again, you misunderstood the parody. Eighth off, okay, you're getting into a debate on extent of state intervention in happiness. I never said states are inherently evil. Evil is moral terminology, right? It's moral, empty speak. It clarifies nothing. I try to avoid moralizing propaganda terms like, evil, immoral, obviously, exploitation. These are all moral terms that don't clarify. They're just emotional appeals. Anyway, what you pointed out is that some places are happier than other places than the people of the United States are. I'm supposing that you're talking about Western Europe. And so what about the United States makes people less happy if this is indeed true? Well, there are a lot more immigrants to the United States. The United States is more religious than the Western European states I presume you are bringing up. Okay. People in the United States are more obese. So assuming all the places that you're talking about are in fact happier according to whatever self-assessment, then we would still have to tease out causation. You just seem to be making the leap that it has to do with the increased welfare statism. And also, welfare statism is not the only thing that anti-statists are against. There's all sorts of, quote, regulations, close quote, that are lobbied for by the businesses to be regulated that actually just benefit those businesses. But so it's not just what's the tax rate. I mean, it's a little bit more dicey than that. Ninth off for Somalia. I have a video on that in the description. That's a very arrogant, terse little thing to say. Oh, you want to be like Somalia. Somalia was piss poor when the state collapsed, and improved to be slightly less piss poor, and improved at a faster rate than the neighboring African states. Up until about 2006, when a bunch of other when intervention in Somalia really picked up. Note that there are various externally funded organizations trying to establish a state in Somalia, and there are in fact foreign-funded governments in Somalia, such as the Transitional Federal Government, the Union of Islamic Courts, and the Galmudug. None of these states have been able to collect taxes from Somalis. They have not been able to establish themselves. The Zir still rules the land, and in practice are nothing more than foreign-funded armies traveling around to wreak havoc. And all the combat in Somalia, the combat's not between the various clans. The combat is between the clans and these foreign funded invaders, either like these Islamically funded Union of Islamic Courts and these UN funded governments. That's where the conflict. It's not between the Somalis themselves. It's between these foreigners who are coming in trying to, be authoritarian busybodies. And even if Somalia actually declined in standard of living following the collapse of the state, and there was no foreign intervention, the chaos of a collapsed state is not proof that you need a state. Like, let's say the state monopolized an industry like electricity. Then say there's a revolution, and now the power plant workers have no idea where their next check is coming from. So you have chaos. On a market, even when a firm goes bankrupt, that just means the bank owns the firm, and the whole firm doesn't shut down outright. I mean, it gets restructured, and that means a bunch of people get fired, but the whole firm doesn't shut down outright like with the state. Boston, the Boston police riots are a clear example of this. The police went on strike and it was chaos. Why? Because the state had a monopoly on police services, and when that sole provider failed, there was no alternative. Now, I imagine if the strike had kept going on, eventually a private solution would have come forward, but because the state had granted itself a monopoly from day one, the police services weren't able to grow in Boston with the population, like as the population grew in kind of an emergent fashion. 10th off, when I said you presuppose a state, I'm saying that you presuppose the necessity of the state to do various things. Like, I know everyone knows that there's no state exact, like the Triassic period, yeah, whatever, okay. 11th off, Thomas Hobbes' state of nature was just something he made up as a theoretical justification for the social contract. Hobbes admitted this. He wasn't saying that it was actually how life was. He was saying that that if that was how life was, nasty brutish, short, war, all against all, then the state, as it existed in his time, would in all likelihood be consented to by the people. Right? He's saying that if life was like that, then this state would have come about voluntarily anyway. So even though the state was not voluntary, it would have come about voluntarily anyway. That was the case he was making. Okay, and he was not making a claim of fact that that's how it was. He's just saying, if that was the case, then it would have formed voluntarily. Anyway, and all you have done is say, hey, there was a time when there were no states. Then came the states. Therefore, the coming of states must be a major part of why things are so nice today. Right? I can make a similar case that monotheism is why we're so much better off than in Roman times. Anyway, keep in mind that states necessarily require a food surplus, because any common definition of state, it involves some sort of army to collect taxes, and these people can't be farming full time. And in point of fact, mining, metallurgy, irrigation system, judges, laws, and prisons, long-distance trade between the Euphrates and the Indus and through the Nile, all came about, and disputes between merchants from these various language zones all came to be without what we would call a state. And so technology was progressing, and as the world population grew, you got network effects, and so technology developed even faster. And of course, technology continued to develop after the priests became kings. 12th off, you don't have to go back and forth in a long-ass video debate. I have a book if you care, if you care to read it, and So you don't have to do this grab ass, ad hoc going through all your various baubles, right? I mean, the literature is all out there right now, and so you can go through the principles in a controlled manner.